This is Germany, a nation known for its efficiency. From a highly productive automotive industry to cities where people never cross a street before the light turns green, Germans like to do things with precision and order. You'd be forgiven for assuming that the railways here run like clockwork, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Decades of underfunding and neglect have led to outdated and overloaded infrastructure, resulting in frequent delays and cancellations. Despite having more than 1,500 kilometers of high-speed lines, trains are held at a red signal far too often, and other countries are starting to take notice. But now, Germany is embarking on its biggest rail overhaul in decades, investing billions in the troubled network. This is how it plans to execute one of the largest upgrades of its kind in Europe, while battling to complete a pair of mega projects it has been trying to finish for years. In September 2023, Germany's Minister for Transport, Volker Wissing, made a significant announcement. He launched the largest infrastructure program of its kind since the German rail reform in 1994, 3 years after reunification. Why? Because since then, activity on the country's railways has grown significantly. Between 1994 and 2022, passenger volume increased by 46%, and the share of people traveling by train compared to other modes of transport rose from 6.7% to 9.3%. Today, the system operated by state-owned Deutsche Bahn handles almost 100 billion passenger kilometers every year. However, this rise in demand has led to some significant problems. More travelers mean more trains operating on a network that's actually smaller than it was 3 decades ago. As Deutsche Bahn admitted in early 2024, the infrastructure cannot cope with the constantly growing volume of rail traffic. The system lacks robustness, resilience, and capacity reserves. Considerable quality deficits are the result. So, how bad have things gotten? In 2023, only 64% of long-distance trains arrived on time, the worst figure on record. That same year, Deutsche Bahn had to pay out more than 130 million euros in refunds due to delays, a 43% rise in 12 months. And it isn't just Germans who have suffered during the Euro 2024 football tournament. Late and overcrowded trains caused travel chaos for fans, and even the teams themselves. In short, these railways are now in a sorry state and in need of significant investment. Fortunately, that's exactly what the country is getting. Wissing and his federal government have decided to inject a staggering 40 billion euros into the country's railways up to 2027. What's the plan for all that money though, and which areas are of the greatest concern? Perhaps most importantly, why hasn't Germany done anything about it until now? Well, that isn't entirely true. Back in 1972, when it hosted the Summer Olympic Games, Munich unveiled one of the biggest public transport systems in Germany, the S-Bahn. If you're not familiar with German railways, S-Bahns connect a city center to suburban areas, operating both above and below ground. U-Bahns, on the other hand, operate solely within the confines of a city and are mostly underground. This S-Bahn was designed to transport 240,000 people every day when it first opened. More than 50 years later, around 850,000 people now use it. That's almost 4 times as many people in half a century. Although there are 8 different lines on the Munich S-Bahn branching out across the region, when trains reach the city center, they all have to pass through a single main line. Not only has this tunnel reached capacity, but it has also developed into a major bottleneck. If something goes wrong on the line, there's no alternative route. So how is Deutsche Bahn addressing this issue? What do you do when you have a single line running through a city that has become chronically overcrowded? You build a new one. Yes, a second main line is now under construction to ease pressure on the system, cut travel times, and ensure the S-Bahn keeps running when problems occur. Approximately 10 kilometers in length, it will run from Laim, west of the city center, to Leuchtenberg Ring in the east. There has already been a lot of construction happening, such as at the Western Tunnel Portal, where trains will pass under the existing tracks on their way to the center. Since summer 2024, the outlines of the future tunnels that will be excavated with TBMs have been clearly visible, ready for the machines to start digging. After entering the portal, trains will soon arrive at the main station, which is being completely redeveloped. Platforms for the new route will slot in beneath the existing levels, 41 meters below ground. A new reception building is in the works too, which will be located where the OL ticket hall once stood. That was demolished back in 2019, a process that took around 2 weeks. Well, before one of those pits we talked about goes in, a diaphragm wall has to be constructed first. It forms the outer shell of the station and is built by cutting a series of vertical slits deep into the ground. A special formwork is placed into these slits, which is then filled with concrete, and the process is repeated around the perimeter. Meanwhile, holes are drilled all across the site for the steel supports to slot into. Next, it's time to dig those pits, enabling excavation to take place under the surface right up to the diaphragm walls. Concrete covers can then be put in at certain levels, which become the various floors of the station. Although work has yet to start on it, the new S-Bahnhof will be built just 16 meters deep, this time above the existing U-Bahn line and beneath the overground tracks. Finally, just beyond this point, trains will resurface before reaching the upgraded Leuchtenberg Ring. This is where the new line connects back up with the original core route. All sounds very impressive, but unfortunately the project hasn't gone entirely according to plan. Having started construction in 2017, 2028 was supposed to be the year it finishes, but that's been pushed back by a lot. Completion is now expected between 2035 and 2037, with costs currently set at around 7 billion euros. That figure has risen too. In 2016, it was just under 4 billion euros. There are several reasons for this, as some parts of the project, like the S-Bahnhof, have undergone major redesigns since the first plans were submitted. Approvals have taken longer than predicted. There have been disputed over how the project is funded, and a rise in material costs has not helped matters either. Despite all this, there is widespread acceptance that this does need to happen and that it will be beneficial in the long run. While the current core route serves around 1,000 journeys each weekday, when the second one is eventually operational, capacity will double to about 2,000. Okay, but now it's time to move on to a city northwest of here that's been experiencing an oddly familiar story. A couple of 100 kilometers to the northwest, there's another project that's an immense feat of construction, yet has become known more for its setbacks. Stuttgart 21. Its main component is a huge underground through station to replace the old central terminus. Then there are 56 kilometers of tunnels, more than 40 bridges, and 100 kilometers of new tracks. Now, we're not going to go too in-depth here because we already covered the story behind it and what's made it so controversial in our video from 2021. However, we can provide a bit of an update as the project has made significant progress. All of the 28 chalice columns that support the ceiling of the main station have now been built, along with the roof itself, and according to Deutsche Bahn, the tunneling is complete. However, this doesn't mean everything has suddenly turned rosy with the project. It's now set to cost at least 11 billion euros and has been delayed again to 2026. It's fair to say these city projects haven't exactly been popular with the German public, and the same can be said for the rail network as a whole. But there's been a big development. Another giant scheme now underway has caused more frustration, yet it's likely to make a much bigger impact. A total of 40 rail corridors across the country, at around 4,000 kilometers overall, are being extensively renovated from now until 2030. This is what the bulk of that 40 billion euros is being spent on. The first corridor to be modernized is the Riedbahn, a 70-kilometer link between Frankfurt and Mannheim. Over 300 freight and passenger trains come through here daily, making it one of the busiest lines in the entire system. Because it regularly hits maximum capacity, the Riedbahn is another major bottleneck on the network, which is why Deutsche Bahn has made upgrading it a top priority. More than 100 kilometers of track is being replaced, and overhead lines are being renewed, along with the points all along the line. These are the sections where trains move between tracks. A total of 265,000 new sleepers are being installed, as well as 380,000 tons of ballast. There will also be 3 new crossovers, creating alternative routes for trains running simultaneously. As you can imagine, all of this work taking place on such a key transport route has caused a lot of disruption, especially since it has put the line out of action for nearly half a year. Services have had to be rerouted, adding half an hour to journeys between the two cities. Commuters in other areas can expect more of the same. The line connecting Hamburg and Berlin, which transports up to 30,000 people daily, will begin its own overhaul in 2025 and is also due to close for several months. After that, the so-called high-performance corridors operating out of Cologne and Nuremberg will get their turn a year later. We're not going to list all 40, but to put it simply, all the main cities will be part of it. So if you're planning on interrailing around Germany, you might want to bear in mind that there could be a lot of disruption. However, it's important to look at the end result. The improvements to the Riedbahn are expected to reduce infrastructure-related disruptions by over 80%. A full digitalization of the network is also included in the plan, which promises to raise capacity by 30%. It would appear then that Germans may at last have some cause for optimism and should start to see the effects of this long-awaited strategy in the very near future. With the German rail system at its lowest point in a generation, news of an unprecedented funding boost will have been welcomed by many. However, as we've already seen, spending big money doesn't necessarily mean things will go smoothly. But with those schemes now making progress and a firm plan in place to modernize the entire network, this could be Deutsche Bahn's best shot at redemption. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and want to get more from the Definitive Video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed.